Section 11.2, using the quadratic formula. Formulas are really cool because once you have the pieces, you just plug them in and figure it out. So really and truly, once you know the formula, today's assignment, really the most difficult part is going to be just the computation. So whip out your calculator and now it's an easy lesson, okay? So with the quadratic formula, if you'll look at page 785, it will derive that formula for you. If you'll remember, in the last section we completed the square. So what they've done is they've taken the general form and they've completed the square using just the A's, B's, and C's instead of numbers, and they've shown that every time this is what we end up with. So if you're curious and want to know where it comes from, you can look at that page 785. Otherwise, here's the formula, and you can go and find out where it comes from, or you can trust me that it works either way. So the formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Now the a's, b's, and c's come from if you put your equation in the format of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. That's where the a, b, and c come from. The a is the coefficient of the x squared term, the b is the coefficient of the x term, and the c is your constant term. All right, and so in order to use and I guess I need to back up, we're using the quadratic formula to solve an equation, to solve a quadratic equation that has an x squared term in it. All right, so after you put it into that form, you have to make sure that it's in that form where everything is on the left-hand side and the 0 is on the right-hand side. Once that's the case, then you just identify what is a, b, and c. Then you just plug those into the formula and simplify. That's it. All right, so let's do some. 3x squared plus 10x minus 8 equals 0. Well, that's already in the format of a plus b plus c equals 0 there. And so we're going to go to our formula and we're going to just plug in. So x equals negative b. Oh, I guess I didn't do number 2, huh? Identify a, b, and c. So a is what's above x squared, b is the x term, and c is the constant term, and that's it. So we're going to put in negative b, so b is 10, so we want negative 10 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 10 squared minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is negative 8, and put that all over 2 times a, and a is 3. Whoo! Ta-da! So once you get the parts and pieces in, now just pull out your calculator. And now be careful because we got plus or minus, we got square roots. I don't want you to give me decimals in these, okay? We're going to leave them as square roots. So what you're going to use your calculator for is what's inside here. So 10 squared is 100. And so multiply this, and this is a negative times a negative is a positive, so you're going to take 100 plus, I think when you multiply that out, oh, I didn't put that in my notes, I think it's 96, because then when you add 100 to it, you should have negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 196 all over 6. All right? Now I lost my eraser. Here it is. So now, if you can use your calculator to determine, 196 actually is the square root of 196 is 14. 14 times 14 is 196. So negative 10 plus or minus 14 divided by 6. And so what you need to do now is remember this plus or minus means, oh, we've got 2 answers here. We've got 2 problems. So you're going to take negative 10 plus 14 over 6 or negative 10 minus 14 over 6. So take them one at a time. Negative 10 plus 14 is 4 over 6, which reduces down to 2/3. There's one of your answers. And negative 10 minus 14 is negative 24 over 6, which reduces to negative 4. And there's your second answer. Done. All right? With a squared term, you're going to end up with 2 answers. That's just a hint. All right, so what happens if we have something like this? X squared plus 8x minus 15 equals 14. Don't forget that first step, it's got to equal 0. So This is easy. You just subtract 14 from both sides. Combine the like terms together. So now x squared plus 8x minus 29 equals 0. And now we have our a term, our b term, and our c term. Plug them in. X equals negative b, so negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared minus, yes, minus 4 times 1 times negative 29. And all over 2 times a, which is just 1. And now when you work it out, 8 times 8 is 64, and negative 4 times 1 is just 1. Negative 4 times negative 29 is going to give you a positive, did I work it out? Positive 116. And 116 plus the 64 is 180. There again, see, it's all just computation that you can use your calculator for. So negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 180 over 2. So now, simplifying is tricky. You just have to remember. Here we go. We can do it. 180, if you'll remember, let's see. Let's do 180 is 10 times 18. 10 is 2 times 5. 18 is 2 times 9. And 9 is 3 times 3. I say 3 and I write 2. So we've got 2 and we've got 3. 2 times 3 is 6. So we've got negative 8 plus or minus 6 times the square root of 5 is left, and that's all over 2. And you say, yay, I'm done, but guess what? Because this 8 and this 6 both can be reduced by the 2, what we're going to do is we're going to split it up, and we're going to put each of them over 2 separately so we can reduce it and say this is 4 and this is 3. So your final answer is negative 4 plus or minus 3 square root of 5. And now if you'll notice, on these didn't have a square root symbol left in them, so I was able to simplify it all the way down to whole numbers, or in this case a fraction, all right, to real numbers. This one, because it has a square root symbol, just leave it plus or minus with the square root, and this is your final answer. You're done. All right? One more. Here we go. Let's see. So now, we've got 2 terms on either side. So what I would do is this. Keep the x squared term positive. So wherever the x squared term is positive, keep that one and then move everything else to that side. So in this case, we're going to add 8x to both sides. And I'm going to hopefully this won't bug you. I'm going to do it in the same step. I'm going to subtract the 2. So now everything is gone from this side, and let's simplify what's over here. We've got 3x squared plus the 8x doesn't have any terms like it, so you have to just stick it by itself, plus 9 minus 2 is 7, and that's going to equal 0. And now we have our a, b, and c. Plug it into the formula. X equals negative b, so negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is 7. You'll see it's quicker if you just know the formula. And after you do a few of these, I think you've got 12 of them. After you do a few, you'll maybe have 16. I don't remember. You've got several. You should start. They're not hard. It's just you got to remember that formula. Times 2 over, or times 2a, which is 3. All right. Whip out the calculator. 4 times 3 is 12, and 12 times 7, I think I worked that out, is 84. So 64 minus 84 is negative 20. So negative 8 plus or minus the square root of negative 20 all over 6. And 20 can break down to, 20 breaks down to 4 times 5, and 4 is 2 times 2. So now we have negative 8 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 5. But this is also times a negative 1, so this is 2i times the square root of 5. And that's all over 6. Oh, but check this out. These are also divisible, so we're going to do them separately so that we can reduce. So let's reduce by 2, and we have 4 here and 3 here. and reduce by 2, and we have 1 here and 3 here. And now, because this denominator is the same, you can either keep them separate, and that is fine, or you can put them back together and say -4 plus or minus I times the square root of 5 all over 3. And that is your final answer. Whoo-wee. All right, so now you have, so in this case, really and truly, the trickiest thing is going to be remembering your formula. If you've got it, write it down on the corner of your paper so you can keep going back and plugging them in, and by the end of the assignment, you probably should have most of it memorized already, even without trying. All right, now we have several methods of factoring. So at the end of your assignment, you've got some problems where it says, choose the best method of solving. If you'll remember, when we're solving equations, you've learned several ways. You've learned how to factor, that was the first one, and you've learned how to use the square root principle, you've learned how to complete the square, and you've learned how to use the quadratic formula. Now, honestly and truly, completing the square is probably not the easiest solution. All right, so I didn't even include it in this list of ones you're going to choose from. So if you want to choose the best method to solve, what you're going to do is look at your problem, and you're going to decide, well, can this trinomial easily be factored? Can you set it equal to 0, and then can you factor it out? And that's using the 2 parentheses and doing backwards FOIL. All right, if it can, then you solve it that way. Does it have either a squared term but no x, or is it in the form, can you put it in the form of a squared binomial equals something? If that's the case, then you're going to use the square root principle to solve it. And we did that just the other day, where you take the square root of both sides, and then that's your answer. Sometimes you have to, so if it's this type, you'll have to subtract and divide possibly to get the x by itself. And then today we used the quadratic formula. If it's not easily factored, you can always just plug those numbers into the quadratic formula. All right, so these are the 3 methods that you can choose to solve. So the last section is going to be, okay, you've learned all these methods, which one do you want to choose? And so I'll give you an equation, and I'll say, which method will you choose? And you write down one of these 3 options, and then actually solve the problem using that option. And that's it. All right, see you next time.